We're recording. We're sort of doing this last minute. Ladies and gentlemen, I have Mike Madrid here and Terry. And will you introduce yourselves so that I make sure your last names are pronounced correctly?
I'm Terry Bouton.
And I'm Noelle Cook.
Thank you for both of you for being here. Mike Madrid, and I found you on Twitter because you tweeted something out about you and your wife, and I'm going to hand this over to you soon. It's your story, but you actually attended the Stop the Steal. I'm afraid to say that because I'm afraid we're going to get shut down. Insurrection on Wednesday at the Capitol, and you both did this incredible service, in my opinion, to your country because you sent out a tweet that's like, I don't know, 22 deep in your thread, where we were really understanding firsthand. When I say what was actually going on, there were a lot of people that were disseminating what was actually going on. But I think your perspective as a historian, and I would like you both to introduce yourselves and tell us about what it is that you do. And obviously you've written a book before, so you have a very unique perspective, not only in terms of what happened, but the recount of it. And then we're going to have a conversation about history and moving forward. I think it's going to be a really fascinating conversation. So will the two of you share with us, why were you crazy enough to go there?
Noelle,
oh, it's always the woman.
I didn't want to go because I was convinced there was going to be violence. There was, looking at social media, having some sense of that groups like the Proud Boys and a lot of the far right groups were going to be there. Had a real clear sense that this was going to be bad. But Noelle convinced me to go. So
we'd been to all of the marches and protests in DC since the original Women's March, and I had really taken a liking to photography, and I'm an amateur photographer. So I thought that having these different sets of photographs from the various things we've done would be a nice bookend to the end of an era. I was hoping the end of Trump anyway. And so I had this gut feeling that it was going to be a very significant day. And he's a historian, and so I guilted him and said, "Come on." Plus, it was DC.
She shamed me.
You have a duty to your country.
No! You are a historian of the American Revolution and democracy, and this is an important moment in democracy. And why aren't you there? You need to be there on the ground to witness this. Yeah. And I wasn't going to go. And then she's like, it's DC.
Right. And every time I've ever been to DC and there's even the slightest hint of anything going on, the streets are immediately closed and law enforcement of all kinds descend. On a normal day in DC, if you walk even up on the Capitol steps, you're immediately told to get down. And so I said to him, look, we'll be able to tell if there's a problem. And the moment there is, we'll leave. And there's going to be so much security that we'll be fine.
And we imagine there would be even more security because of the groups that were going to be there, because of these very violent far-right groups that had a history of violence and had been talking about violence. The rhetoric around the whole Stop the Steal on social media had been teeming with violence. And so we didn't think, I mean, if we can find that out, we thought certainly the FBI and federal intelligence agencies were going to know what was have even a better idea what was going on, and would be, put precautions in place to make sure nothing happened. And then we get there. Now we arrived late. We got there about 2, which is just after they had broken through the barriers surrounding the Capitol.
And we didn't hear anything yet when we parked at the Union Station parking garage, and we hadn't heard anything. I think we were listening to CNN on the way in, maybe. And we hadn't heard anything yet being reported about what was going on inside. So once we got in there was no cell service, because there never is when there's that many people in that area. And so we were not able to see anything, and we felt safe because, again, a complete lack of law enforcement. And
for context, no, I apologize for interrupting. For context, this is a very large building, and there's
it takes up several city blocks. I would imagine.
I mean, it's massive. So, can you share with us where were the two of you relative to the east, northwest? Where were you located at this time?
We came from Union Station and we walked straight to the Capitol, and we came into, what do you call it? Lower Senate Park or something.
Yeah, there's that Senate Park where there was a protest going on there that had been clearly permitted. They had a stage set up and a sound system. And as we passed, the guy who got on the microphone was railing about the crimes against humanity by Anthony Fauci. So, like he should basically be executed for
that's
for
what they were
whatever
saying.
crimes against humanity. Like that was the phrase he kept using. It's crimes against humanity. So we already realized we were sort of, over the rainbow, and in a world of people who just were bought hook, line, and sinker a number of we saw every conceivable conspiracy theory. We heard them all. They were all bought into that. So that gave us a taste of what was to come. So we came in on the side of the Capitol near the back, I'm not sure the way the Capitol,
whatever it leads. Like if you were to walk straight up from Union Station, you pretty much we hit a police kiosk first, the Capitol, and there was a single woman there, officer, and we could see, again, we're coming up from the back side, so it's a fraction of the crowd on the front. And she said, "Oh, it's getting hairy in there. Be careful." And I said, "Okay." And then she said they breached the Capitol. And I said, "Oh." And I thought, what does she mean? They breached the Capitol? So I thought maybe a couple of people jumped a barrier.
You couldn't fathom what that meant.
I thought somebody jumped one of the barriers and got tackled or something.
Yeah, we got a sense it was like a sit-in, they got in and they had handcuffed themselves to railings or something. It was
right.
It wasn't any sense of what was actually going on. And riot police started to.
Well, there were 8 to 10 officers all of a sudden.
Capitol Police putting on the riot gear.
They put the helmets on with the shields, and we heard them saying they were going to go in through the tunnels. And next thing I know, but everyone's very kind of casual, it's like, oh, they're going to go get the sit-in people out or something. And they left.
So at this point, you still didn't have a sense of anything near what was actually happening.
No, in
Never
fact,
did.
The female officer, I said, "So I'm just going to go back here and take a few pictures. It's okay, right?" And she's like, "Just be careful." Okay. So we walked across that street onto the backside of the Capitol, where people are hanging across the back of it and the crowds are down below. Clearly, we still have no idea what's happening inside. Zero indication. No air. There's no helicopters above. Nothing. So we just, I went to the end, I don't know what direction that was, but to one of the sides of the furthest away from the police kiosk.
Yeah, we headed out towards the lawn area and kind of like circled our way in. And our biggest fear wasn't the crowd or violence, it was COVID. Because
no one had masks
90% of these people did not have masks on, and were zero social distancing going on. I mean, that was a super spreader event of super spreader events.
That was crazy. So that was my main concern. I didn't even get nearly the number of pictures I wanted to get because I felt like I had to be looking around me constantly to make sure some unmasked person wasn't in my face. And I also was aware that there was always a potential for violence given the crowd I was in.
Right.
And it turns out this crowd we were in on the backside was not a great crowd to be in, because that was a lot of the people who had originally entered the building were coming out the back doors. After that's how we all found out about Ashley Babbitt.
Right after that crowd, after they got gassed, after Ashley Babbitt got shot, like they exited through the back. And so it turns out, we found out later when we looked at video and compared it to our pictures and video.
When the 2-minute video was released of her getting shot,
we were
all
around,
the guys we were with are in the video.
We were around a bunch of the Proud Boy guys were right around us. So we were. But we were also.
Are you feeling under, like, at what moment do you realize this is not normal? This is not a regular protest. Like
the entire time.
The entire time. But I think it really hit me after. You see, you have to remember, we went until 5 o'clock. In fact, we went until 7 when we got back to Baltimore and turned on the news without ever knowing exactly what was happening inside. Mm-hmm. It looked like an unruly crowd that got out of control. It looked like what LA looked like during, when the Lakers would win the playoffs, right? There was no indication that people were being killed inside.
And so,
and I processed that
so many questions, and I don't want to slow this down. And Stephanie, I don't mean to just jump in here, but one of the things that was, when I was reading your thread, that I was so fascinated by was you said that it was clear that this was every aspect of the Republican coalition was there.
Yeah.
This wasn't just Proud Boys and white supremacists. It was kind of like there were little old ladies in like Republican Women's Federation groups there.
Yeah, most of them.
Evangelicals. This was a Christian.
There were nuns.
Yes, there were nuns.
Priests and nuns handing out rosaries and
Yes.
I just the depth, maybe from a historian's perspective, I've always been of the opinion that this is not just a political problem, it's a social problem. Like something is happening in our society where people are somehow not just rallying together behind a politician, but insurrection and violent overthrows of the government are they're rare, fortunately, in the United States.
Right,
So rare
yeah.
that nobody living has really seen one here on our soil.
Right.
Can you share with us, like, historically, when this has happened and what kind of brought that about?
I mean, what I think, I mean, my perspective on this is that, I mean, what we're seeing is really, if you take a longer view, that, I mean, we've had moments in time where there's been social change, and particularly, I mean, I think race is clearly a key component of this. Race and culture are clearly a key component of this. There's been, you know, like in the American Revolution, there were rights in the North extended to African Americans, and free black men could vote in many states. And then the revolution doesn't turn out so well for lots of white folks and a lot of white men. And the beginnings of industrialization don't turn out so well either. They find their farms failing. They find, you know, artisans are finding their jobs de-skilled. And we have a backlash, which is cultural, which is racial, anti-immigrant, misogynistic, right? Trying to strip rights and powers from women. We have the mass disenfranchisement of Black Americans in the North, so much so that on the eve of the Civil War, like 93% of Black Northern men could not vote, and they had like Jim Crow laws in the North and the rest of it. So you know, and then we have another moment in the Civil War and Reconstruction where we find, right, the greatest protection of Black rights in American history up until the 1960s and 70s. You know, state legislatures become some majority Black. There's congressmen and a couple senators. And then we have, right, the rise of the Klan and this incredible white backlash after that. You know, jump ahead to the civil rights movement of the 1950s, 60s, and early 70s, which then the Black civil rights movement then spawns, right, the women's movement, the gay rights movement, there's a Latino movement, all these different, you know, environmental movements, all these sort of social movements. And then, you know, like Nixon, you know, the rise of Nixon is a backlash to that and the era of conservatism. I think we have you know, Obama seemed like we were moving in the other direction, and then we have a similar backlash against that. So I think this is a lot about, it's about race, it's about culture, it's about people who see their way of life and way of being in interacting, the things that they want to say and do. I mean, white people have done an awful lot in this country without consequences, and they're used to doing things without consequences. And I think one of the things that's happened, and especially recently, especially with the rise of the internet and social media, is there are consequences for actions now, right? I mean, police can't beat up Black people like they used to because someone's going to videotape it. You can't shout racist things at people and chase them out because someone's going to videotape it, put it on the web, and you're going to get fired. You're going to so that
it is remarkable, like how much, especially college educated whites, and, you know, the campaign that I just did with the Lincoln Project is focusing on college educated whites and the realization that, oh, this is happening.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Black people have been saying this for 150 years.
Yeah.
And until you see it like daily, like it was like,
Right.
it wasn't just one, like Rodney King was like, just happened to get caught on video in 1992. This was like a daily stream. It's like, no, this is the way the world works. This is what is happening in your country every day. It started to move the consciousness of white Americans. Saying,
I think so. You know, and the question is woke, and it's less, I think, woke people were asleep, then they just didn't know and didn't see it,
right?
Because they didn't have the contact with it. And so the internet culture and social media brought that in very quickly and allowed things to spread incredibly quickly and allowed for organizing and mobilizing. I mean, a lot has been made of the terrible ways in which social media and the internet allowed the right to radicalize and mobilize and organize and use the internet as a tool to spread hate and to find other people and to, you know, radicalize gamers and the rest of it. But it's also done an awful lot on the other side. I mean, it's been also a way of civil society policing on uncivil behavior and behavior that's seen beyond. So I think it's sort of both at once, right? It's blowing things up, but also creating a new kind of civil society. And I'm actually, you know, optimistic and positive about a lot of that, because I think that these tools allow disparate Americans to see one another and humanize one another in a way that they haven't been able to, and communicate and coordinate. You know, when I write about revolutionaries in the you know 1760s to 1800, and the big problem that they had was they would reach situations where they were all facing similar kinds of situations, had similar kinds of grievances, but they couldn't organize, they couldn't mobilize, because they didn't have a way of communicating with one another. The roads are bad, there isn't really not much mail per se, and they didn't have ways of talking and communicating and coordinating, especially over huge geographic areas. So if the revolutionaries had Twitter and and Facebook, it would have been, I think the revolution would have been more democratic, more powerful in that way. And I think that's where we're going. But the issue, I think, for what we're seeing with a lot of the people who were at Stop the Steal was that this also is elevating voices and bringing a kind of equality that they see as demeaning to them, simply because it's raising someone else up to their level. And that's the history of whiteness in America, right? That's the history of different moments where there is someone's pushing for some kind of right that white people and a lot, especially like working and lower middle class white people, have seen as a threat to them, because they don't have a lot economically. And what do they have? They've got their, often it was white men who had their maleness and their whiteness, and there wasn't, so they were very,
you're right. That's your status. Once you lose
they were
that,
very clear about protecting that. So this is a long history in which the current moment is merely the latest expression of, but my sense is that this is kind of like the deathmatch version of it, which is the dangerous part of it, because demographically they realize, and the rights talked about this, right? I mean, like, Jews will not replace us, you will not replace, that they're worried that they know they're going to be demographically a minority. They're aware that millennials and Gen Z are much more tolerant. They're watching corporate America have mainstream advertising of ads with like interracial two gay dads, right? I mean, it's
the local hardware store that's been there for 30 years is now a taco shop with a Spanish surname.
Yeah, right.
That's right.
What do you think this is the beginning of a period of violence and social unrest as white Americans start to use that kind of leverage and privilege to lash out?
I think the violence has been there. I think that we've seen it now. I think what the difference is now, it's going to be increasingly directed against the state. I mean, we've had moments like that before, like Timothy McVeigh and the whole militia movement and the rest of that was, I mean, right? We've seen that part of it before. I think this is another wave of it. And I think it's why it's so important that there be accountability and consequences, regardless of talks about unity and peace and putting all of this behind us. I think the transgressions have been too far, and the injustices are too deep and too long in people have been enduring them, that we need a truth and reconciliation, and we need to get it all out there and to to deal with it, kind of once and for all. Like, let's have this moment where we decide we want to live up to our ideals in America. But that's going to be violent, because other sides, they're not going to take it.
That's right. That's right.
They're going to fight.
That's right.
But if we make
I wanted to ask you, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I said, I think we need to fight, but we also need to realize they're going to fight. But one of the things was the other thing about the composition of that crowd, right? It's not just the hardcore. You're not going to change the Proud Boys' minds. You're not going to have a session with them where they're going to, you're going to be like, oh, they're going to cry and hug it's not, we're not going there. But you can enforce consequences on the middle and upper middle class people there. right?
Duke sweater.
They're very comfortable, right? One of the first people we saw who had been pepper sprayed was a guy wearing a Duke, like alumni sweater. Like it wasn't the Duke basketball stuff. It was a small, it was a sweater with an embroidered patch, which was, this guy was my 99 whatever % sure this guy had gone to Duke. And he was wiping pepper spray out of it. He hadn't come for battle. He didn't have battle.
One of the first arrests was a CEO of a tech company that came down from Michigan. It's
right.
What has this country sold you out on? Like,
but this is it. I mean,
I
think as this happens, as more of these arrests happen, we realize like this was a middle class, upper middle class, like rebellion or temper tantrum or whatever it was. And when these people have stuff taken away from them, when they lose their jobs and when they, no one's going to hire them and their neighbors don't want to talk to them, that works. Like that, they're persuadable. And if they're not persuadable and they're going to believe these things, we can at least, I think, alter their behavior. Like we can put a price on doing the things. And that's why they're so against cancel culture, right? Because it's them. It's their behavior that's going to be regulated. It's their behavior that's beyond the pale. And so it's like they want to attack cancel culture because, well, I can't lie and I can't use the N-word anymore and the rest of, I
can't wear a Camp Auschwitz sweatshirt.
Yeah, I can't wear a Camp Auschwitz sweatshirt and people are going to yell at me for that and not want to hire me.
Which is why part of the appeal of Trump is that he spoke his mind.
Yeah,
he was saying racist stuff. He was saying misogynistic stuff. It's like inappropriate. Cool. That's why, fascinating.
And you guys, I want to get back to this thread because I think that there are some things that because you were there and you were eyewitnesses, and by the way, some of those pictures are fantastic.
Thank you.
But what we sort of heard and what was being disseminated from news organizations, which, and by the way, I'm not placing any blame on anybody in particular. It's just depending upon where you were, you would see what you would see. But there were some points that you made that were disturbing that I think I'd like to come back to. And I think that, again, if you've ever been around this building, there's always security. You can't just run in. You can't just walk into Nancy Pelosi's office. You can't just walk onto the Senate floor. I mean, it's a maze. You
can't walk on the steps of the building. You can't,
that's right. I mean, you're stopped. But we were just starting to talk before we hit record. Will you talk about the police presence, about law enforcement, about what did that look like? It sounds like there was some, I mean, you have some scary information on that. I think it's worrisome. So can you walk us through what was happening?
Yeah, go ahead.
Part of the reason we went is that I convinced Terry that we'd be safe because every other thing we've ever been in at DC has had lots of security. For example, the Women's March with lots and lots of middle-aged women. We had to bring clear backpacks. We couldn't bring poles or sticks of any kind. If signs were to be held, or I think we had to go use cardboard. We went through a checkpoint where our bags were looked at, and I believe there was a metal detector. Science March, same thing. And so this was really strange to me that we were able to, especially in hindsight, is really when it bothers me most because of the timeline. We arrived on site at about 2:10 p.m. I still don't know how the exact timeline, but if I'm not mistaken, this started in at least 20, 30 minutes before we arrived.
Yeah.
And yet we were able to walk straight in.
Can I throw one second?
Please.
Because of just
That's
something
terrifying.
that happened before that. I was, so after this thing went viral, I got sent, I got an email from, turns out a math professor at University of Maryland College Park who was there as an observer too, but he was there for like the end of the rally until the Capitol, and he hung out. He left about 1 o'clock. But what he got was the beginning of the march, and this is the most. I think this is the most.
It's chilling.
This I've put it on Twitter, and it should get disseminated more. It's one of the most chilling thing I've seen of the whole episode, which is the march starts with the Proud Boys, and right, they have their Enrique did nothing wrong sweatshirts on. And
when you say the march started, literally they were sort of the first.
They were the vanguard of the march. They were the ones who said, "Hip, hip, hip, here we go," and started it. And it's all the paramilitary groups, the rest of it in the front, and they start the march chanting, whose streets? Our streets. Whose streets?
Yeah.
Our streets. And they're all leading the way to the Capitol in their, in their gear. They're dressed for battle. They're leading, and they've got the crowd behind them also chanting, whose streets? Our streets. Mm-hmm. There's no cops around. There's no police. There's no federal police. There's no law enforcement in
Not even on the
frame.
Streets lining the
None
streets.
of the streets. Every other march, Science March, police every other,
Science March was, that was huge.
Block.
With
yeah.
Bill Nye.
Yeah. But it was like,
hey, Mike, and by the way, Terry, Mike, for context, Mike, you've been, how many times have you been there in your life?
To the Capitol?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, geez. I went to school at Georgetown. So a lot.
So, I mean, you have years
hundreds
of experience there. And so have you ever heard a situation that they are describing now in terms of the onset of the marching and the chanting with the information on social media, this was going to happen, and for them to see at this point, zero police presence. Would you have ever believed that?
No, I mean, DC knows how to do a protest.
Yeah,
yes, exactly.
Yes.
They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So and this was not, it wasn't organic. It didn't start as a flash mob. Just the internet decided, okay, let's go drive down.
Yeah.
Like this was weeks in advance. Like everybody knew it was coming.
Well, this wasn't just a protest though. This was also the House and Senate in session with the Vice President present. So and
they were voting on something rather significant. I mean, this is where the electors are coming, and they're going to make a significant decision, of course, about accepting this free and fair, safest election we've had in our nation's history. And so I wanted to put a pin in the standpoint that it's impossible to imagine that there was no police presence, even if there were 5 police. And it would be impossible to imagine that.
No, and we made our way to the end of the building because we saw a handful of police cars down there, and I felt more comfortable being near law enforcement. When we approached, we saw a FBI SWAT team arriving with about 8 to 10 SWAT members, and I'll let you tell the part about the fanboying, but we thought, okay, we'll stand by them. They're on standby. They're on standby in case something happens, is what we believed. Well, about a half an hour later, I suppose, DC Metro Police came with an ambulance, and then the SWAT team starts getting their gear on. And then it dawned on us, they're here to provide cover to the EMTs removing the body from inside.
They're getting Ashley.
40 minutes after we heard she'd been shot, the ambulance came, and the FBI all went in that side door under the back steps. And the next thing I know, they come out very quickly with the FBI the SWAT team flanking them. And they ran the gurney literally right in front of us. We had no idea this was going to happen.
It was like 10 feet away.
And And as soon as they put her in the ambulance and the ambulance left, so did the SWAT team. So.
And that was it.
And that was all on the backside.
This was it. We were, I mean, there were a handful of, the presence on the backside was, there were some officers who were up on the Capitol steps, like 5 or 6 of them, but they weren't doing anything in the crowd. They were off to the side of one of the balconies.
They couldn't do anything. They were so out. I have a photograph of when you're going up to the back steps. If you wanted to go up those stairs, right, the little side stairs, there were about 6 officers and maybe 4 or 5 behind them, trying to block that entryway so that they could keep more people from coming up on the back steps. Because the back stairs and the back doors then were used for people who are inside to come out of.
And to go in and out.
So those doors were never even secured in the back because they were completely outnumbered. Shortly after Ashley Babbitt was gone, we did see a chain of Capitol Police marching towards the Capitol building.
Probably a couple dozen.
Yeah, at least. It was about what I saw when I went to the Kavanaugh hearings, who marched through the Senate building.
I would say less than that.
Yeah, maybe less, but maybe a couple dozen. And it was Capitol Police. They came in. One of my last photographs was at about 4:50 p.m. and I took it at the back of the Capitol. And you can see at the very top, it almost looks like a football game where the people are standing at the very top of the bleachers, making sure everyone's leaving. Because I think things are set up for the inauguration. So at the very top of whatever looks like bleachers, you can see cops just kind of standing around there, Capitol Police just standing around there because they can't do anything. Because the minute at this point, the crowd's turned on the police too, because of the shooting that occurred.
And because the police were trying to do their job.
Yeah, because they were doing their job. They were no longer their friends. And we actually heard them saying, you're now traitors.
Yeah. But we were there almost 3 hours.
Yeah.
And there were no
With no
reinforcement.
idea.
The only FBI we saw was that one SWAT team to get Ashley Babbitt out, and no other forces came except for one reinforcement of Capitol Police.
Yeah.
That was it. Nothing.
At 5 o'clock, as we were leaving, because I wanted to be out of there before dark, and we were walking to our car, I did see a whole chain of squad cars coming in from Fairfax, Virginia. And I saw one green armored vehicle come in the driveway, but that was it. I don't know.
Yeah, it was they got in when it was just hours.
And what makes me really angry is that I was putting myself at much greater risk than I ever imagined, because it turns out people had explosives in their vehicles and firearms, and people were being killed inside a building, 50 meters from me.
I mean,
and I had absolutely no idea until I came home and turned on the news.
We couldn't imagine when we got home what was going on, that the presence outside of police, that like the place should have been swarmed within like 10 minutes of every available force in the area. Like, how did that not happen?
No,
that does not, I mean,
I have one photograph of
it feels impossible. And this is,
it is impossible.
Yes.
It's impossible to happen by accident.
Right.
I looked at one of my pictures. It was taken at about 4:40, and I was of the Washington Monument. And when I zoom in and look behind the monument, I can see 3 what probably look like some kind of military vehicles behind the monument, but they're on the other side of it from the Capitol, that were clearly set there to protect the monument.
Yeah, it was
right. I mean, what else was there over there?
When I wrote that in that tweet, like, I'm an historian, and we try to be careful about conclusions and make sure
I'm not an historian.
There's evidence for them, but when I wrote, it was purposefully understaffed. Like, it was purposefully left vulnerable. I say that because there's all of the evidence of experience of anybody's experience in DC would tell you that there's no way that happens by oversight or whatever. There's no way the FBI and intelligence agencies didn't know that bad stuff was going to happen and that there were terrible people.
Well, and even if they didn't, they had 3 hours to deploy something, and they did not do that either. So,
well,
not even with the Metro Police. Metro Police were there, but they couldn't come on the grounds.
Right. And as soon as you have a shooting inside the Capitol, do you know how many hundreds and hundreds?
The vice president was there.
That's right. Mike, what are you?
And
what are your
leader?
Right. I mean, it's just you have members of Congress that are locking down inside, and Mike, what do you make of all of this?
Well, I want to ask, and again, there's so much I want to ask, but as an expert on revolution, did you ever think that you would be in the middle of an insurrection and a rebellion? Is this what you thought the energy would feel like? I mean, what was it like for you?
It was bizarre. What was bizarre about it, and most bizarre, was that these people believed that they were revolutionaries, believed that, like, we heard everybody talking about, this is 1776 and we're revolutionaries and calling each other patriots. Like, that was, they're people dressed in tri-corner hats all over the place. And, like, they had fully embraced that kind of vision of what they thought that they were doing. And they thought that their cause was just and righteous, and was nothing could stop it, because, that's why they're taking video. Like, we were concerned about taking pictures and video because we didn't want people to think we were like tracking them or whatever. But everybody there was taking video. Everybody was taking video of everything that happened and selfies of stuff. Like, they were clearly proud. They clearly thought that they were heroes, and they were going to be treated as heroes. So it was this incredible delusion and self-delusion. And that's what reminded me of was not the 1776 revolution, but the stuff I wrote about in my first book, which is on the 1794 whiskey rebellion, so-called whiskey rebellion, in which people did the same thing. They deluded themselves to think that everybody was going to join their side and would rise up. And if an army came against them, the army was going to, turn around and turn their guns on the government and come with them. And that's why they should fight, because nobody was going to take them on, because the people were going to stand together. And that doesn't happen, right? They get creamed. Like, they don't even fight, because once a 10,000 man federal army comes toward them, they give up. But and that's quite frankly what needs to happen here is a tremendous federal backlash. We have law enforcement backlash against these people to enforce consequences for this kind of action, because the thinking is delusional, and the thinking is, but it's dangerous delusional, right? That if they're convinced they're the majority and their cause is righteous, that this is just, we heard from so many people saying, this is just the beginning. Like, this is just the start. They were elated by what happened. And this was people who had been in the front, who had seen what had happened, or people who had been inside and participated in it or seen what would happen. Like, they saw that they entered violently. And yet they are convinced that they're heroes, that they're patriots. Patriot was like, it was like, I kept thinking, it was like, this is like the French Revolution. Like, this is like the terror. And they even rolled up a guillotine. Like, they constructed a gallows, and then there was like a little guillotine there. And I kept thinking, my God, this is like, in the French Revolution, and everyone referring to each other as citizen, and then they'd bring the traitors out and lop off their heads, and the crowds would cheer. Like, others have compared it to a lynching. Like, this is like the lynching culture, where it's a angry, violent celebration, right?
A public spectacle.
Yeah, total public spectacle. And that was really the vibe. That's the vibe I got from it. And the casual ways in which people were talking about extreme acts of violence. Like, it's sort of like, well, yeah, of course we execute, Nancy Pelosi and Pence has got to go. It's sort of, these are dirt traitors.
Is there any doubt that if they had found members, they would have harmed or killed these people?
I have no doubt.
Yeah,
I have no doubt they would have tried.
I'd still like to say no, but I think that's a foolish position. I think all the evidence suggests otherwise.
All you have to do
like
is
they
look
were
at what
they were
happened to the officer.
they were hunting them.
They were hunting
and
them.
they were saying, whatever, hang Pence, whatever. They were hunting. This is dangerous. This is real. And these people are, the worst thing was that there were a lot of people in that crowd who look like your neighbors, who may be your neighbors.
Which is why we could walk around and fit right in,
It was like a middle-aged, upper middle class crowd.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Did you notice, you guys, what strikes me is that I know that, and of course this is true, right? That there were a variety of sort of factions within the violence, right? You sort of had, again, the kid with the Duke University sweatshirt on. And
it was
that was a middle-aged man.
It was like a middle-aged
man, sorry.
I think. He may have been in his like 30s or whatever.
Right.
A youngster.
Then you see, this guy that looks like he's wearing, cosplay, right? He's got the
totally
right. And did you sense that they all felt like they were one big sort of team? Like there was a unity versus, well, I don't really want to be seen with you. You know what I'm saying?
No,
there was none of that.
None of that.
And that was surprising.
Okay.
Because you had a woman maybe looking just like me, standing next to a guy in some sort of paramilitary stuff with an incredibly offensive slogan emblazoned across his chest. And it was okay. There was no one seemed to be concerned at all about the things that were being said or chanted or worn. And
there were like flags there where we were sitting. We took pictures of stuff because like, what's that flag? I've never seen that flag before. And there were like, the KEK flag, the KEK, which is one of these alt-right things, which is like out of the gamer culture where KEK was off of things like LOL in, I can't remember, Japanese or Korean. And then they turned it into a whole thing. Like someone looked up that KEK was a Egyptian god that had a frog head, which of course these guys love Pepe the Frog. So they made Pepe the Frog into this god, and they were all into that. So these
It's
sort
like
of
a pseudo religion for them.
I mean, it's because the cosplay thing fits into the whole
Yeah.
vibe here, right? Like we're just joking. We weren't really going to hang them. We weren't really like, it's that they sell it as kind of like a plausible deniability.
Yes.
And like, that's like Donald Trump, right? I say and do offensive things and crazy things and authoritarian things, but I'm just joking. Like that's a lot of the mindset here, which is very, very dangerous.
Some of them don't say they're joking though.
No.
there's a faction of them that aren't joking at all.
Yeah, there's some hardcore, scary people.
It was shocking.
Now, at the point that the two of you saw her bloody body, I remember seeing it on television, and I actually had a moment where I had to sort of shake my head because I really didn't believe what I was seeing.
Mm-hmm.
It was not dissimilar to 9/11. 9/11, I'm not comparing the two. I'm not comparing,
Right.
but it was that sense of, I'm not sure my eyes are
Right.
connecting the dots with my brain that this is actually
There's a lot of that going on. A lot of cognitive dissonance, a lot of
I mean, it was so you, but going back to that, so you see the ambulance leave, then you see them, more law enforcement's leaving with them.
Yes, but more law enforcement. Then that's when the Capitol Police started to come in. They started marching in.
Okay.
yeah, probably about 5-10 minutes after.
After
About
the
5 to
ambulance
10
left.
okay.
And to which they were greeted, traitors. We had your back. Why didn't you have ours? Cowards, F the police. And as I was filming the line of police officers coming in, I happened to pan to the right, and the guy standing next to me turned to my camera and gave me a little speech about how the police were not our friends. They were going to take they're the muscle of the government. They're here to take our guns and put our children in concentration camps. They're not our friends. And he kept saying like, F the police.
Yeah.
And so they turned almost instantly.
There was a really bizarre relationship between these groups and law enforcement.
Yeah.
So there were almost more of the thin blue line flags than there were American flags there. And a lot of, and so, but there was an expectation. We heard it from numerous people in numerous places. And in some of the videos that you can see online, like one of the Jaden X ones that where Ashley Babbitt gets shot. The guy who was actually standing next to me at one point in time is right next to her there. I have him on video talking afterwards, but he is in there saying to the police, right, we had your back last summer when everybody hated you, and now you have to have ours. And that sentiment was everywhere, right? Because we're clearing this flag, you need to do, right, we're your ally, you're our ally, we have mutual loyalty here, and you need to be loyal to us. And when the police were doing their jobs, they turned on them.
You know what's really interesting though? I just thought about this when you said that. The guy who is in that video next to her when she was shot was someone we actually had overheard talking out. He was kind of holding court, telling people what he'd been inside, and his voice is very soft, and obviously he was probably in somewhat shock. And he said, "I don't know why they had to shoot her. Right. You know, they didn't have to shoot her. They just had to push. They could have just pushed her back."
Even before that, he's saying. You know, he was talking about, I was right with her when he shot. And as soon as he said that, I like pressed video on my camera and held it up because I was like, if this is a confession by this guy of having been in there, this is going right to the FBI, which was what we did as soon as we got home.
But it was already out there.
But but this guy's saying it's like, you know, talking about pounding on the windows and breaking things down. And he was saying,
while he was on the inside.
Yeah, but he says like, I suppose it's not maybe the nicest thing to do. Like that's how they were describing that scene in there. Right before Ashley Babbitt was shot, maybe we weren't doing the nicest things,
and it kind of.
But they didn't have to shoot her.
No, it was kind of goes with what he was saying. He was kind of saying like, you know, we were just joking.
Right.
We didn't mean it.
Wasn't
no one had to get killed.
Right.
It was this real disconnect.
I was kind of jarred when I heard you say when he was talking to the police officer, one of these guys with the thin blue line flag, saying, "We're on the same side."
Yes.
Like that's literally the mentality, and it explains so much about the antipathy towards the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yes.
All of the unrest that was happening.
Absolutely.
People saying we're on the same side. Like, where?
Oh yeah, and
it's troubling at like a lot of levels. It just kind of hit me.
A lot of levels.
Oh my God.
Absolutely.
Like he really believes that, and it's like, should he believe that?
Right.
What does that mean? And
but then they turn like
law enforcement at? And obviously there's a lot of great law enforcement officers, a lot of heroes here, But
Right.
the fact that that's the emotional understanding or belief anyway.
Or belief,
That
right?
And
Or
it's
belief.
on the same
And it was common.
side.
It was
common.
everywhere. Everywhere that was the belief.
In fact, right after that body left, one of the guys that actually has seen in the video of the lead off of the march I have photographs of him up on the top of the steps with his blue line flag where he's shredding it
Yeah, I saw
by
that.
hand.
That was a very
and
powerful picture that
throwing
you
it.
took.
And yeah, he shredded every piece of it and threw every piece down at the crowd.
Who's chanting F the police,
Yeah.
F the blue.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
but
a
even
mob.
before that, like when the FBI SWAT team shows
Oh,
up,
right.
right? They pull up in their, shiny Humvees,
Mhm.
and they get out.
One
Humvee.
Humvee.
One Humvee. I think there were a couple, but
Mm.
it was one.
It was
They
one.
Yeah, they get out and they start. They've got, well-fitting, beautiful camo outfits and high-powered
Big guns.
hardware and the rest of it, and like it was like little boys rushing over and like they're fanboying the FBI, like, oh, can I see the gun? Oh wow.
Yeah.
Like they were ogling it and like drooling it. Like they've got their makeshift camo outfit they put together for the day, and then but here's the real guys, and
Wow.
it was just like little boys.
Wow.
But then as soon as the
Half hour later.
as soon as this FBI team went in to take out the body, then it's like, you guys are traitors. You're like it
Killers.
flipped
Killers.
like that.
Traitors and killers.
It flipped like that. It was.
I have it on video. It's amazing. I kept listening to it over and over again. I'm like, wow, this turned fast.
I have law enforcement in my family, and I called one of them for their response, and big man who started crying and said,
Yeah.
they're victims too. Like this is insane.
Yeah.
I
They
mean,
were.
He was shaking because a career in law enforcement, he was seeing, why was nobody there?
Mhm.
I don't think
Yeah.
they were allowed to be there. Why were
Yeah,
they? It was going through his head live, and he was, I've never heard this man cry. He's this massive tank, and he couldn't hardly get the words out.
That's what I've said in each time I've been interviewed or people have said, because the emphasis is on like, oh, the Capitol Police were complicit, because yes, it appears that there were some officers who were sympathetic to the crowd, took selfies, opened doors, or did whatever. Like there's 2 suspended and 15 under investigation or whatever. So clearly that was, but
Vast
basically
majority.
everybody we saw looked scared
Oh,
and
yeah.
worried and were just trying to do their jobs without any kind of support, and try to not give any indication of how scared they were.
right.
I mean, when we saw the faces of some of those people who were going in and putting their riot gear on, even in the beginning, like that was like one of those moments where it was like, there's only 10 of them. They look kind of scared. Well, maybe this is not kind of they're used to dealing like with trying to, crowd control. They're not used to dealing with this kind of this kind of protest and the rest of it. So
So guys,
but
at this point, but you were on the side, but did you end up walking all the way around to the front, or did you never
Yes.
make it?
No, we
You
were able
did.
to walk everywhere we wanted. Yes, we
This is
we
what I
walked
can't
the entire
I can't
perimeter.
understand. So you're just walking around. You have the
Yeah.
freedom
Yeah.
to pretty much
Yeah.
go wherever you want to go. So
Correct.
as you're again, I'm trying. It almost feels like this conversation isn't real because we watched it, but it's just it's insane. So you then.
It's funny. You can tell the people who know DC versus the one who don't. Like it feels like, because they're all like, what?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you start heading towards the front now, how much time do you suppose has passed? Because of course you're there around 2.
Oh,
You're
well,
now
my
coming-
pictures, I have timestamps on everything. So I can
yeah,
tell you exactly the
So
time.
you come up towards the front
We
now.
went, by the time I got around front, it was about 3:20.
Okay. Okay.
And
what does that look like now in juxtaposition to you've been in the back, you saw some people coming out, you didn't really get it, then all of a sudden the body comes out, now you're moving towards the front, and at what point did you turn a corner and go, what was that?
I never
moment?
did.
You never did.
We never did.
Okay.
Because when we got around the front, all it was is twice as many people on the front side doing exactly what they had been doing on the back side.
Okay.
Right. I mean, my what moment was when I way past the park and heard them saying the crimes against humanity against Anthony Fauci. I was like,
about the vaccine.
all right, here we go. It's sort of like
Right.
we're going into crazy land.
But we never had a what moment, because even though I was able to zoom in on the front doors of the Capitol building, I could see that they had broken stuff. I
Okay.
could see that some those front doors with the scalloped molding around the,
Okay.
I was able to get photographs of that, but I didn't get anything other than somebody leaning in with their camera trying to tape whatever was going on.
Sure.
But again, there was absolute, when the FBI SWAT team left at about 2:45 maybe, we assumed, well, surely there's nothing too urgent going on if the only federal agency except for Capitol Police is leaving, then there's nothing to worry about.
And then Terry, you made a comment.
I hate
Oh,
to
Mike,
do
I'm
this.
sorry.
I'm gonna have to drop off. But I wanted to say thank you
can.
so much for this.
Hey.
This has been really phenomenal. I think that the listeners are gonna love this. I'm glad that you guys
Yeah.
took the time out to do this and put yourselves in harm's way, knowingly or unknowingly. And
Honestly.
thank God you're a photographer and a historian at this moment,
I
because
know.
your firsthand account, I think, is going to be really instructive in understanding what it was like to be there in the middle of all of this. So thank
I
you so
agree.
much. And it was
Well,
great.
thanks,
spending
Nate.
I
Thank you for
agree.
having us.
I
Awesome.
agree. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. So just real quickly, of course, I know you guys have been phenomenally busy too, and there's more people that want to talk to you. But what I was trying to get to, Terry, is that we had been talking about how you were taking pictures and how, of course, you did this great thread, but you had made a comment about there were reporters there, there was media there, cameras, etc., but that were there people destroying their equipment? I mean, what was happening with the media?
We didn't know. We didn't see any media. Like we were like, where's the media? Like where? And evidently they were inside. And we didn't even know when we were there. We didn't see the destroyed equipment when we were there. I've subsequently seen, pictures of it and heard descriptions of it. But we didn't see other people around. The only one we saw was like a Reuters, AP or Reuters, who were on Constitution Avenue.
And that was a Hispanic station.
Was it a Hispanic station?
Mm-hmm.
And they were, but they were there, and the woman was standing there like a statue, not moving. And people kept coming up to her like, "What? Who are you with? Who are you with?" And she just stood there, like she didn't respond to anybody. They had the camera there, the camera rolling, and they didn't talk to anybody. They didn't engage with anybody. They were just like, she was just like, "Get me out of here alive," was what my impression of
we
it.
did see two other crews filming on the median kind of.
Right.
There's like a little small fence, and the people were on the other side of the fence with a bullhorn yelling "liar, liar" as loud as they could to try to disrupt the broadcast.
Right. Yeah. I forgot about that one.
But that was also
that
was just like a camera person and a reporter, two different ones.
And they were setting up.
They were setting up or taking down. I don't know what
it was about. It was late. It was after 4.
It was after 5. It was as we were leaving. Yeah.
So that's also just crazy. So then, so again, I mean, sort of as we move towards, I guess, a wrap up, I'm scared this isn't going to be wrapped up for a long time, but
it's not going to be wrapped up for a long time.
It's not, but at some point you decide to go home.
Yes.
Yeah.
Before dark. That was my rule. We had to be out of there.
That sounds really smart.
We were under the impression the troublemakers were going to get there after dark.
Exactly.
As opposed to the trouble already happened.
If there's going to be trouble, it's going to happen after dark.
Broad daylight. Yeah, right. So when you get home, you turn on the news.
CNN.
Yeah. And we were like,
and what do you see? Because now you had your experience there, but now
I thought it happened after we left at first. I thought it was happening after the troublemakers after dark.
That makes sense. So
then I started looking at what was happening.
And then what are your thoughts now as you're watching this unfold? Are you trying to?
That's what I'm trying to process now, because I'm realizing that I put us both in extreme danger by insisting on going there. Because you have to remember, it wasn't just what was going on at the Capitol building, but I believe sometime after 12 noon, pipe bombs were found in front of the RNC and the DNC headquarters. And there was a third one mentioned somewhere on the Capitol grounds complex there. Right. So if you're finding 3 pipe bombs 2 hours before everybody's convening, don't you, I would think there might be some tightened up security.
To be honest, I wasn't as worried, because we're white and we're middle aged.
Well, that's why I wasn't.
We're invisible. Right. We were invisible.
I get it.
Like I'm like, all right, I'm white, I'm invisible, and we're not doing anything. We're just walking around.
Even when I had my camera and my lens it's a good size lens. And I got a couple stares a few times, but I was greeted as patriot more often than not.
Yeah, people like, calling us patriots.
Someone
Yeah.
actually came up to me and said, "Hun, don't go that way. They're gassing the patriots."
Wow.
Like, hun, don't go that way. It's
They're like gassing the
someone's
patriots.
out.
Oh, you mean if you're trying to
Wow.
work your way in?
Wow.
Oh, look at the little cute dog.
I know. This is where we are.
The Pomeranian.
It's a Pomeranian.
He's so cute.
So you are watching CNN and you are starting to get the sense that this was even worse than what you could have imagined. You are seeing that the dog. You are seeing. You are really seeing how violent and how bad it was, and through your eyes, you were there. What is going through your head at this point? What is happening? Are you thinking, okay, I'm alive, I'm grateful. What are you think? What is happening? What are you thinking?
I don't know. She had a rough day. I think the day after, the 2 days after.
Yeah, I think it was Saturday when I really started processing. I think it was especially when it was when the video of the officer who was being smashed between the doors came out, and when I started to see the barbaric
That was hard.
behavior. That it was all the video. It was after all the video came out. It was one thing to come home and realize they were trashing things in there and all that, and then obviously, it was all those videos that came out showing the torture that was going on inside, literal torture to at least 2 officers I've seen videos of. And that's been really hard for me to process, because that's when you start to realize I was standing in the middle of people who are willing to do something like this, but then you have to stop yourself and realize you're willing to stand around with people every day, obviously, since they all look like us, you can't tell who they are. And that's why something's got to change.
That's right. Something does have to change. And of course, we're looking at, Joe Biden will be inaugurated. I'm scared that we have a lot of people that don't believe that even.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I worry about the state capitals.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, I think we're all worried about a number of things. I was pleased to see the FBI, doing a press conference today explaining that they are coming after, and they're going to make sure that every single person, right, that they find, and they're going across the United States.
Yes.
This is really serious. That's right. This is really serious, and I think we have a lot of work to do in this country, and I think other countries are absolutely blown away by what they're seeing, because they always say, well, you have it so good. You have it so good. And friends outside the country have said, yeah, you guys haven't had a seeds before, have you? Right. In countries where this happens.
Yeah, right. But they're also like, we've done a number of interviews with like British outlets and an Australian one. And they're all just sort of like, what's going on over there? They're like, we have our problems too. And we have this too, but like they never expected this from the United States. And I think, it's really thrown people, but in a way, as bad as it is, and as terrible, it's not like this terribleness wasn't there before. It's not like the racism,
that's right,
and the xenophobia and the bigotry and the hatred
and greed. And
it's not like all that wasn't there. It just was, we didn't know about it, and we weren't trying to do anything about it. And now
and you're right.
No, we knew about it, but it wasn't affecting us personally.
But now we're doing something about it. Now I think that's where social media is different, and video is different. That it humanizes people. Like how George Floyd was a human being. We all didn't watch a black man being killed in a barbaric way. We watched a fellow human.
Someone's dad.
And I think that's exactly what needs to happen, is more humanizing, because they're trying to dehumanize other people, right? And so I think the more that we humanize, and the more that we have consequences, and the more that we, go back to the American Revolution. They didn't kill a lot of people in the lead up to 1776. They killed British officials. They used they terrorized them for sure. They used political violence, but it was like, the tarring and feathering. And I'm not trying to minimize that, the seriousness of that kind of politics, but they weren't killing people, right? Yeah. That they used community pressure. They used shunning, right? That the idea was like, if somebody had clapped stamp, they're dead to me, and they're dead from now on, and nobody's going to talk to them, and nobody's going to do business with them. And this is beyond the pale, and we're just gonna enforce that as a community. And that kind of community censure can be terrible and regressive when it's racist and against immigrants, or, they used to do that to poor women who came through with, warn them out of town. Like so there's that kind of like small town, us versus them. We can be us within our community, but not out. Like, but that kind of social pressure, I think, also has a role in civil society, right? Before we lock people up, before it gets too far, is to say, hey, that's not okay, And I think one of the differences and one of the things that's happening that's kind of pushing this is that now there's a lot of white people who are trying to be allies to Black people and say to other white people, that's not okay.
Right.
And standing up. And when more people do that, when more people stand up for equality and civility and against bigotry and hate, that's how we get to the beloved community, like
I do.
Yeah. I mean, we were in Atlanta for a wedding. It was actually a gay wedding. We were there, interracial gay wedding.
Interracial gay.
Yeah.
Oh no.
and it was wonderful. And we went to Ebenezer Baptist Church, and we went to the King Center, and it was, I think because of the times it was, and the event that we were there for, it was incredibly moving in a way where it just sort of felt like, we're all in this together. And the more that we realize that we're in this together and not be, and call out our aunts and uncles who are, beyond the pale.
That's right.
I think that's how it happens. I think
it is how it happens.
But we also have to realize that, we're not all going to come along, and we're not all going to come along at the same pace.
Right.
And we're just going to, some of that you're just going to have to accept. Like we're going to have to hope that the next generations and try to instill in the next generations.
That's right.
An appreciation of the values of America, but the actual values, right? Democracy and equality and justice for all. Like those are wonderful ideals.
Right.
And they are inspiring ideals. And it's time we lived up to them.
I agree.
Time we did.
Yeah. It seems like as a people in in history, the pendulum swings, we go really far this way. We seem to kind of settle in the middle, and then we go flying over this way. But it seems like we always find our way back to the middle. And in the horrible, horrible last 2 years, I think that what we know, if we look back at history, what we know will happen now is ugly was given an equal platform. Ugly was given a light to shine as if it was cool and popular.
Right.
It's giving us an idea of how many people have been disenfranchised in the political process, how many people have been left behind with equal access to healthcare, education, et cetera. So we have a lot of angry people and we have a lot of division. What we do with this moment in time is what will matter.
Yeah.
And if we decide that we are better together than we are apart, and we humanize each other and understand that we all basically want the same things. We love our children, we love our parents. We want to live in a safe, civilized society where we all take care of each other.
Yeah.
When the buildings at 9/11 came tumbling down, nobody was reaching over saying, well, you're white or you're Black or you're Asian, I'm not going to reach out to you. We all connected in our humanity because we needed each other to survive. And I would argue that we need each other to survive this.
Oh yeah,
and we will survive this,
and not just survive this, because we have to get through this. We have to actually wrap this up pretty quickly, because
that's right.
The challenges of massive climate change and that's a doozy coming down that's a freight train.
I mean, it's here, right?
Yeah.
It's here, and I think that between that and this pandemic and all of these things that are actually, they're facts. We're not making this up. They're not political rhetoric. We have facts. We have science. Once upon a time, science was viewed as fact, but we're going to get back there. But I think we have a new administration coming in that does support science, that does look at the facts. And I think you're going to see policies now move forward that are going to be supporting some of the things that we must get to on an emergency basis for our planet, for our country, and for our people. And I just, both of you, I appreciate your time. I knew, coming from my background in communications and media, I knew you were going to be overwhelmed with calls and attention, but I've been so involved, and of course my involvement with Mike in the Lincoln Project, and then of course the work I'm doing in healthcare and medical misinformation. I read this and I was so emotional as I was looking at your pictures that you took, and Terry, as I was reading your words, and I genuinely appreciate the time that you have spent, and it's so wonderful to meet both of you, and I am so deeply appreciative that you took the time and the pictures and the time now to kind of tell people what's going on. It's going to require all of us, I think, to just be brave and be vulnerable and be authentic, because many people like me and maybe even like you, we stay quiet because something is just too controversial or it's too difficult. And I know I've made a decision that transparency and honesty and vulnerability and connecting and not shaming, but just saying, look, we must get you the truth. And as a result, we've got to come together and make this look different now.
Yeah.
Are there any other thoughts the two of you have before I let you go back to your insanity right now?
It's dying down.
I'm optimistic. I mean, I am, and I'm an historian, and I'm a practical cynic, I think, in a lot of ways, about, especially as an historian, it's hard not to be, right? As an historian, because you see the bad and you see the evil that's always been there, that has been allowed to flourish, and you also see the change, and you have an understanding about how it happens, and I think that there's a generational shift that's coming, where there's huge numbers of Gen Z and the younger millennials, and they're very different. I mean, I teach college.
Very
and I'll
different.
tell you, they're very different than the kids when I started teaching. And
thank God. I'm so happy about that. They're pretty cool.
They have their own issues. They're going to be, there's new and different kinds of problems that but it's nice to see that tolerance and equality are not the problems that they're going to have.
I agree.
And so, I mean, I think, and it's not, it's social, racial, and economic. I mean, that's once we, like, I don't see, it used to be like, I used to be more of the mindset that, we solve economic problems and then we'll take care of these other ones. But that I was completely wrong about that. That without solving racial, gender issues and making people equal, you're never going to have economic equality. Like this is where the game is. Then those two, but it's also really important, right? There's so many people struggling and just getting by. So much, maybe it wasn't economic, anxiety or whatever that's the driver of this, or anywhere, not the primary driver of this, but the situation people find themselves in I think that plays a role. Like if they don't feel valued and they feel somewhat desperate and constantly worried about things and angry about
and hopeless.
That makes
if you can't wake up and see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. That's a 100%. terrible place to be, and we have millions of Americans that feel that way every day,
and more every day as long as the pandemic continues.
And I think things like, I think that there's a coming together. Things like the Lincoln Project, where I was, to be perfectly honest, really skeptical. So I'm like, because like some of you all created the system. Some of you all made the Southern solution, right? You were the ones who thought it was
flying in and be the heroes now.
Okay. So I was like, all right, but
totally.
It's right. But I've seen what has struck me as seeing what feels like, and I'm still somewhat skeptical, but what feels like genuine change and internal change and move, like a different perspective, and saying, okay, we were wrong about some stuff, and now we're going to try to make up for it. And so we're not just going to, I hope this continues, because we're all in this together, and we've got to come together. And as long as if we are authentically behind goals of like democracy and equality, and like we need, and solving problems of not just, social inequality, but economic inequality and healthcare inequality, and solving environmental problems. Like there's not one solution for all of that. That's hard stuff. There's lots of different ways to do it. There's a lot of different ways to get to universal healthcare. Let's all agree that we were trying to get there. And then in a very good-spirited, good-intentioned debate, let's figure out how to get there together.
Right. I agree. And the Lincoln Project, whether it winds up remaining forever or not, and I don't know, my work with them was surrounding making sure that Trump would not get reelected. But I think it did start a movement where you saw Democrats, Republicans, Independent, Decline to State, Green Party, all rallied together for a common cause. Now, I know I've heard from some friends of mine, well, the enemy of my, friend is not my enemy, or the friend of my enemy is not there's all these people that are approaching this with, I'm like, listen, even if you part ways, whatever that looks like after that, you at least learned you both have moms and you both maybe have a sister. At least it created some common, and I think that movement is not going to die. I've seen too many relationships and too many new ideas come forward as a result of that. And that is incredibly important. Incredible.
Yeah, I think what it does is we humanize each other.
That's right.
We have conversations and we're civil, and we realize, but I also think that once, it begins to, again, at the same time that we're humanizing lots of different kinds of people that white people weren't humanizing before, and considering their experiences and and we still have huge gender issues in this country. Look at the pandemic, right? All the jobs that were lost were by women, all of them by women. Not even close.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of problems that are going to require people to have open minds and to consider different kinds of solutions.
Right.
And we have to do it. We have to do that together. When we have to be dealing in fact and reality.
Yes. Yes, we do. And I'm hoping from an academic perspective that we can decide that it might be a good idea to start teaching civics every year. Every year. You don't just take a quick, you start at Schoolhouse Rock civics, and then you move up to the next civics, but it's something that is continually taught along with critical thinking. And that we say, no matter what, we're teaching critical thinking and we're teaching civics. If we can do that at every level of academia and let it get more sophisticated and more, I think we can make a little bit of a dent.
Yeah, we're trying. We're trying at college level.
I know, and God bless you for doing it. And before we go, I did want to understand, though, from the photographer in the room and from, she's like, well, I actually got us into this position. How could you have known that you were walking into an historic moment from a violent, you could not have known, but you, but
it was going to be historic in some way, but not like that.
No idea. But before we part, you were just starting to share that, as you sort of reflect on the reality of what was happening as you were standing there, you reflect on the violence that was happening. And we've all seen some of the video that is so disturbing and so heart-wrenching. What are your thoughts about the future? What are your thoughts about the now, about the immediate future and the long-term future?
I worry that without Trump in office, that people are going to just go back to normal. It's over. It's over now. It's not over now.
No, it's
Trump
not.
wasn't the reason for this. Trump was elected because of it.
He's a symptom. He's a symptom.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I'm going to take Terry's optimism and hope to ride that wave a little bit, but it's going to take all of us, everybody, like you said.
It is
to keep recognizing, to keep calling out.
That's right.
Family members, friends, whatever. I did a whole purge of my friends list on Facebook back in 2016. And that's what it takes. It takes people saying, because I think at this point in time, there's a line drawn. It's not,
I agree.
I can't look at somebody who says I support this without saying, if you support that, then that means that you're okay. Because even if you want to say you don't support it, you're okay with it.
I agree.
And that's the line for me.
I agree. I don't know how to reckon with that. And I don't know how to reckon with people who are talking about some minutia. And I'm like, you do know in the background, we're losing thousands of American lives. Every day. You do know in about a month, we're going to hit 450,000 people dead.
Yeah.
And you do. So we are in a disconnect, and it is an interesting time. And I'm sure you've had this experience too, but people I've known for a long time, we are waking up every day and we are seeing the world so differently that I don't even know how to go back and have a cup of coffee at this point and just have a conversation. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't know.
Yes.
How are you doing? I don't want to know. I mean, if this is something that you support and this is what's so hard. I don't have the rage and the anger towards people that I know I've been getting. I actually hit Facebook for 5 days and said, I'm going to do a test, and started talking about all of this. And you can imagine It was the rage and so I did the test and I ended the test. But here's what I do think. I think that it's going to be people, and I say this with no bravado, no elitism, no nothing. It's going to take schleps like us, right? It's going to take people like us who have the mind that we are better than this. We must do better than this. There must be consequences for behavior that is violent and destructive and takes lives. There needs to be consequences for the new, which again, I know this isn't a popular opinion among some, but we have taken technology platforms to task now because they are quote unquote censoring. And I'm suggesting we need new legislative language that says it is the equivalent of running into a building and yelling fire.
Exactly. It absolutely is.
Inciting violence, creating chaos. And so there's going to be a change that needed to happen anyway. We can look forward now to some platforms cleaning up their user base. And look, I don't view it as censure, but if you want to call it censure, sure, we're censoring dangerous information. Sure, well, let's call it that.
It's not even dangerous information, it's dangerous misinformation.
That's exactly right, which is dangerous.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see some cleanups. It's going to be rough. We're going to have more deaths. We're going to have more violence.
Yes,
but
I agree.
And we will. But then we are going to reach a point where people sort of find their spaces again, where we are going to do a little bit of a reset. Government is going to start to function again. We will get there. People will start to realize that you don't have to think about the president every day, and it's normal to not. It's
We don't
normal
have to have CNN 24/7 like some news network.
When I can recognize the voice of a House member from Arkansas,
thank you. Thank you. I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. Both of you. I really am grateful actually for all of this, because I've had the chance to meet the two of you, and you're people I'd love to go have dinner with one day when we can do that again. I think you're just delightful.
I know. I'm dying to come home. I'm from California as well.
Oh, are
and I haven't
you?
been, yeah. And I usually travel home like every 10 to 12 weeks, and I haven't been able to go home for ages, and dying.
I know. I hear you. We're all missing our people.
Yeah.
No question. But thank you so much. Sincerely. You're both just really lovely people. And I'm so
thank
grateful
you.
that I have met you. And I'll download this darn thing. And thank you for being truth tellers and truth seekers, and deciding that you're going to do right for this country, as am I. And I know Mr. Madrid and many others. So we have brighter days ahead. Indeed.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, both of you. Have a wonderful evening.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.